My masterpiece. There is something about you that the world has not fully seen yet. Not because it is hidden by accident. Not because something went wrong along the way. But because the fullness of who I made you to be is still unfolding. Still pressing outward from the inside. Still emerging like a structure whose final form has not yet been revealed to the passers-by who have only glimpsed it through the scaffolding. You have been walking around with a weight you cannot quite name. A sense that there is more to you than what you have been able to express. A quiet, persistent knowing that the version of yourself that people encounter every day is only a fraction of what exists beneath the surface, beneath the performance, beneath the careful editing you have learned to do on yourself in order to fit the spaces others have assigned to you. That feeling is not imagination. It is not wishful thinking. It is not the kind of self-flattery that a soul conjures up in moments of insecurity to compensate for a deeper sense of failure. It is something much more real than that. It is recognition. The deep part of you recognizing something true about the blueprint, the way a piece of a puzzle that has been held separately finally begins to feel the pull of the shape it was made to complete. The real you is becoming visible, not louder, not more impressive, more true. Before I laid the foundations of the world, before the stars were positioned in their courses and the seas were given their boundaries, I sat with intention over you. Not in the general sense in which a creator might cast a wide plan across everything that exists. Precisely, particularly, the way a craftsman sits with a single piece of material and considers what it has the capacity to become, what its particular grain and density and character suggest about the form it can best take, what exact use it is suited for that nothing else in the workshop is equally suited for. I sat with the idea of you, and I was not hurried. I was not making something ordinary. I was making something that would matter in ways that no one would be able to fully catalog. There is a word that matters here. Before. Before the circumstances of your birth shaped you. Before the environment you grew up in began to form you. Before the people who had authority over your early years impressed their own understanding and limitations and expectations onto you. Before all of that, I already knew you. I already had in mind what I was building. The things that were added to you by the world were additions to something that was already there. They shaped the expression of the blueprint, sometimes helpfully and sometimes not. But they did not determine the pattern. The design preceded them. It was not dependent on them. It will not be limited by them. What I placed in you before you were born is not negated by what the world placed in you afterward. The original remains. It has always remained. And it is what I am pointing toward when I speak about who you are. Every detail was chosen. The particular way your mind links ideas together, the distinct quality of your attention when something captures your genuine interest, the precise way you read a room when you enter it, the depth of your capacity for care, the unique shape of your humor, the particular things that break your heart, the particular things that make you come alive. None of these were defaults. None were the result of random combination or developmental accident. Each trait I placed in you was placed because it was needed, because without it, something I am building through you would be structurally compromised. You are not a rough draft of a better version that I have not gotten around to completing. You are the finished composition, still growing into the fullness of itself, still expanding into the space I planned for it. Consider what it means to be built with this kind of attention. An architect who is planning a significant structure does not accidentally include a room or carelessly position a load-bearing wall. Every decision reflects a calculation. The angle of a staircase is deliberate. The height of a ceiling is intentional. The placement of a window is chosen for a reason that serves the function of the whole. Nothing in a building that was crafted by someone who knew what they were doing is arbitrary. Everything is there because it belongs there. When I composed the architecture of who you are, I was not improvising. I was executing a plan that I had conceived with full knowledge of what it would need to accomplish, and every element of the blueprint serves that purpose. What you carry inside you is not a collection of random characteristics assembled without foresight. It is an intentional kit. A set of capacities assembled to meet particular needs that exist in distinct places in the exact world that is yours. Your sensitivity is not a weakness to be apologized for or managed into submission. It is precision instrumentation, the kind of instrument that can detect things blunter tools would miss entirely. Your curiosity is not a distraction from more serious work. It is a built-in search mechanism crafted to locate things that need to be found, to notice what others move past without pausing, to pursue questions in directions that yield answers the more efficient and incurious would never uncover. Your persistence is not stubbornness dressed up in better language. It is the load-bearing wall of everything I am building through you. Remove it, and the structure is compromised. Every quality you have spent years second-guessing, every characteristic you have tried to moderate or suppress or reshape because it did not fit the expectations of the environments you have moved through, was placed in you because it was necessary. Because without it, the particular work that only you can do would lack an essential component. You have been trying to renovate the building without understanding what the building was intended for. You have been treating the load-bearing walls as though they were decorative and wondering why the structure keeps feeling unstable. The instability is not in the design. The instability comes from the effort to be something other than the intended thing. There is a particular joy I carry when I think about you. Let me be precise about what I mean by that, because it is not the general warmth I hold for everything I have made, though that warmth is real, and it extends to every corner of creation. What I am describing is something more particular than that. The particular delight of a maker who has poured genuine attention into a piece of work and, when the work is finished, looks at what has been produced and knows that it came out exactly right. Not perfect in every superficial sense. Right. Suited. Fitted precisely for the purpose that was in mind when the work began. That is the quality of delight I have about you. You came out exactly right for what I made you for. When the last detail of who you are was set in place, before you drew your first breath in the world, there was a moment of satisfaction. Rather than pride in the self-congratulatory sense, it was satisfaction in the way a builder who has solved a difficult structural problem feels when the solution proves itself sound. You were a difficult and beautiful intention to execute. The particular combination of qualities I put in you, the way they interact and reinforce and sometimes create tension with each other, that is not an accident. That is a sophisticated piece of engineering, and the result was exactly what I was aiming for. You have perhaps spent long stretches of time wishing you were different, wishing you were more like someone else whose gifts seem more obvious, more recognized, more rewarded by the environments you have both moved through. Wishing you were more articulate, or more at ease in large groups, or more naturally confident, or more organized, or more spontaneous, or more something other than what you naturally and essentially are. And I understand the impulse behind that wish. The world has a way of signaling, often loudly and repeatedly, that certain kinds of people are more valuable than others, that certain traits earn more recognition, more reward, more room in the conversation. And when the traits that are celebrated are not yours, it is very easy to begin to believe that yours are lesser. But what the world rewards and what I planned are not always the same thing. Often they are not even close to the same thing. What I crafted in you was not built for the particular reward systems that human culture has arranged. It was built to serve needs that those reward systems often fail to recognize, to reach places that applause does not penetrate, to do work that does not make headlines but changes lives nonetheless. The value of a gift is not measured by its visibility. It is measured by its function, and your particular gifts are functioning even now, even in seasons when they feel invisible to you and unremarked upon by anyone else. So let me speak plainly about the blueprint. Let me tell you what I see when I look at the architecture of who you are, not with the critical eye of someone cataloging deficiencies, not with the disappointed assessment of someone who expected something different and is trying to make peace with what they got. With the clear, satisfied eyes of the one who drew the plans in the first place and knows them by heart. I see the original blueprint, the structure I intended. The child I made before the world had the opportunity to begin the slow work of convincing you that you were a lesser version of something better. What I see is not the edited version of you. It is not the version you present at work or at family gatherings or in the carefully curated way you move through situations where you know you are being assessed. Beyond the version that has learned which parts of yourself are safe to show and which need to remain carefully managed. What I see is the full version, the version that exists underneath all the management, the one that occasionally surfaces when you are completely at ease, when you forget to perform, when you are so genuinely engaged in something that the monitoring falls away and what is left is just you, functioning as the individual you actually are. That version is the intended one. That version is what I had in mind. That is the soul worth being, completely and without the exhausting performance of being someone more acceptable. I want you to notice something about the moments when that version of you emerges. Notice what happens to the people around you when it does. When you stop performing and start being, something in the room changes. It is not because you have become impressive, it is because you have become real. And real, in a world that is saturated with performance, is disarming. People lean toward it. They do not always know why. They just know that something shifted when you stopped managing yourself and started simply being present. What they are responding to is the pattern. The actual thing I built, making itself available for a moment without the usual filtering. And it reaches people in ways that the filtered version cannot, because people can feel the difference between someone who is performing and someone who is present, even when they cannot articulate what they are feeling. The blueprint is still intact. Underneath everything that has happened to you, under the layers of disappointment and self-doubt and accommodation and careful management of expectations, the architecture I put in you is still sound, still structurally valid, still capable of being fully inhabited. The work now is not renovation. Instead of improvement in the direction of something different, the work is occupation. Taking up full residence in the individual you already are, the soul you were already made to be, and allowing that one to function fully in the life that surrounds you. This is why these words are reaching you in this particular season. It is not because everything is already in order, and it is not because the journey has been easy or the destination is already visible, but because something in you is ready to hear it, ready to look at the blueprint clearly, perhaps for the first time without the overlay of other people's expectations or your own accumulated self-criticism. The moment for this kind of seeing has arrived. And what you see, when you look without that overlay, is a blueprint that is worthy of your full occupancy. A human being worth becoming, completely and without reservation. I want you to hold that truth firmly before we go further. You were made on purpose. Every detail of who you are was placed there with intention and care. The pattern is active. The calling is real. And the fullness of what I made you to be is not waiting for you somewhere in a future that requires you to first become someone else. It is available to you now, in the life you are already living, in the person you already are. What is emerging in you in this season is not a new you. It is the full you. And what I feel as I watch that emergence is the deep pleasure of a maker watching a structure finally, fully come into use. Let me say one more thing about the design before we move forward. About what the plan is not asking from you. It is not asking you to have it all figured out. It is not asking you to have resolved every question about your direction, or arrived at perfect clarity about what the next season holds, or produced sufficient evidence that the gifts are real and the calling is genuine. It is not asking you to be further along than you are, or to have made better use of the time you have had. The design works with what is present, with the individual as they actually are, in the season they are actually in, with the understanding they actually have. It does not require an idealized version of you to become operative. It requires the actual one who is here, the one who is here, in this moment, carrying what you carry, having been through what you have been through. That version is enough, not as a consolation, as an intention from the beginning. That is the version the blueprint was built for. So, when you encounter the gap between who you are and who you think you need to be, before you are finally ready to step into the calling, close the gap by revising the requirement rather than the person. The requirement that you need to be further along, more sorted, more impressive, more certain before the calling can function, is not from me. It is from the accumulated pressure of a world that measures people by those standards. My standard is different. My standard is faithfulness with what is present. And faithfulness with what is present is available to you right now, exactly as you are. You have lived long enough to have a history, and that history has weight to it. Layers accumulated over years of living. Seasons that were luminous with possibility and seasons that were so dark you could not find the edges of them. Chapters you look back on with genuine gratitude, and chapters you would excise from the record if the editing were available. Choices that bore real fruit, and choices that cost you things you are still paying for in ways you may not fully recognize. Relationships that built you and relationships that broke something in you that took years to begin to repair. I have been present through all of it. Rather than watching from the safe distance of an observer who maintains clean hands by staying out of the mess, I was embedded in it with you, feeling the particular weight of your grief when it was at its heaviest, knowing the sting of your failures from the inside because I was never outside of what you were going through, sitting with you in the ache of disappointments that came without warning and took longer to absorb than you had anticipated. Some moments were not comfortable. Some chapters were not easy to accompany you through, but I was there, every moment. I was never evaluating from a distance whether your performance qualified you for continued support. Present, because my presence is not contingent on your performance. What you may not have fully realized is what I was doing in those difficult seasons. It was never passive observation, and it was never patient waiting for you to get through it so we could resume the real work. It was active engagement. The kind of work that a skilled builder does when the conditions are difficult and the raw material needs to be shaped by processes that are not always pleasant. I was working with the material of your experience, including the hard and unwanted parts, to produce something that could not have been produced without them. The things that broke you also shaped you. Consider that for a moment without deflecting from it. The loss that hollowed you out also created capacity. The space where the thing you lost used to be is now available for something else. The hollowing was not only damage, it was also the creation of a container. The waiting that felt unbearable, the seasons when everything seemed suspended and nothing seemed to be moving, was from my vantage point preparation. Deliberate, purposeful preparation for something that required a particular kind of readiness that only that precise waiting could produce. It was never punishment, and it was never negligence. It was preparation. Think about what happens when a building is being constructed in earnest. There is a period, often a substantial period, when the most important work is entirely invisible to anyone passing by the site. The foundation is being laid. This is the most critical phase of the entire project. The quality of what will eventually stand depends entirely on the quality of what is being done underground, where no one can see it and nothing visible is happening. An observer who does not understand construction might conclude that the project has stalled, that nothing is being accomplished, that the investment has yielded nothing. But the builder knows that everything is happening. The most important everything. Your difficult seasons were that foundation work, the excavation that had to precede the structure, the removal of what could not support what I intended to build through you. The things that were cleared away from your life were not stolen from you. They were cleared. Some of them were things that felt essential, things you had built significant portions of your identity around, and losing them felt like losing yourself. But the clearing was necessary. What remained after it, the core of who you are, the things that did not collapse when the pressure was applied, those things are the load-bearing structure. Those are the parts I was always building on. Your difficult seasons also revealed something that easier seasons could not have shown me or shown you. They revealed the architecture. The places in you that held under sustained pressure are the load-bearing places. The places where you bent nearly to the point of breaking but did not break reveal the resilience I built into the architecture. The cracks that formed and then healed show me where the material was stressed and how it recovered. A building that has never been tested by weather tells an engineer much less than a building that has survived seasons of it. I know you in a way now, after what you have been through, that I could only know you by having walked through it with you. And what I know is this: you are structurally more sound than you understand yourself to be. The capacity that was built in those seasons is not only resilience, though resilience is part of it, and it is not a small thing. It is also understanding. The particular quality of knowing that can only be produced by having been through something, by having navigated it from the inside rather than observed it from a safe distance. There is a kind of wisdom that can be taught, and a kind of wisdom that can only be lived. The lived kind is the rarer and more valuable kind. It is the kind that allows a soul to speak with genuine authority into someone else's experience, not because they read about it or theorized about it or empathized with it from the outside, but because they know it. They were there. They survived it. They came out the other side of it still holding the things that mattered. You have that kind of knowing now. About particular things, particular kinds of pain, particular kinds of confusion or loss or waiting or failure. And that knowing is not incidental to the blueprint. It is integral to it. Because part of what I built you to do involves being present with people in places that require someone who has actually been there. The one who comes to someone in their darkest moment with polished words and a cheerful manner and no first-hand knowledge of what that darkness feels like is offering a different thing than the individual who can sit down in the darkness with them and not be rattled by it because they have been there themselves. You can be the second kind of soul. In precise ways, in distinct situations, with particular people, you already are. And here is something I want you to see about the process of being shaped by difficult seasons. It does not happen automatically. Two people can go through identical circumstances and come out the other side carrying completely different things. One comes out bitter and closed. Another comes out deeper and more capable of genuine compassion. The difference is not in the severity of what they experienced. It is in what they chose to do with the experience as it was happening. Whether they allowed it to teach them or only to wound them. Whether they kept some part of themselves oriented toward growth even in the middle of pain. Whether they held on to the things that mattered when the pressure was at its strongest. You held on. Perhaps not perfectly, and certainly not without moments of letting go and having to pick things back up again. But the essential orientation, the part of you that keeps pressing forward and keeps caring and keeps showing up even when you are not sure what for, that held. And what held in you through the difficult seasons has become part of your foundation in a way that cannot be produced by anything less demanding than what you went through. A foundation is tested by weight. Yours held weight. That is not nothing. That is the thing that everything else stands on. This is part of what I was building in the difficult seasons. Beyond character, though character was absolutely being built, it was context. The particular context that positions an individual to reach places and people that comfort and ease cannot reach. Your history, including the parts of it that you would not have chosen, is part of your equipment. The particular path you have walked has placed you near things that I want to address through you. Near people whose experiences overlap in particular ways with yours. Near situations in which the understanding you carry is precisely what is needed and could not be provided by someone whose path has been different. Do not be ashamed of what you have been through. Do not feel the pressure to edit your history before presenting yourself as someone capable of being useful. The edited version of you has less access than the real version. The polished, difficulty-free version of you can only reach the polished, difficulty-free version of others, which is a smaller territory than it might appear. The real version of you, the one who has been through actual things and carries the actual knowing that actual experience produces, can reach into the actual places where people are living their actual struggles. That access is not incidental, it is built. I allowed what I allowed in your life, including the parts that were hard, not to damage you, but to give you a reach that a life of uninterrupted ease could never have produced. Notice that the people you have been most helped by in your own difficult seasons were rarely the people with the most impressive credentials or the most polished presentations. They were the people who knew what they were talking about from the inside, whose presence communicated not just the right information, but the right understanding, the kind that comes from having actually been in a comparable place. You have been that person for others. You may not have known it in the moment, but there have been people who walked away from an encounter with you carrying something they needed and could not have found anywhere else that day. That is not an accident of personality or good fortune. That is the intention meeting, the moment it was built for. So when you look back at the difficult chapters, at the things that cost you, and the seasons that were silent, and the losses that you have carried forward in ways you are still learning to hold, I want you to see them differently than you have been seeing them. They are not evidence that I was not paying attention, and they are not proof that something went wrong that should have gone right, that you were given less than others, that the making was somehow flawed. See them as the underground work, the foundation phase, the excavation that had to happen before the structure could rise, the preparation of a child of mine who is now, in this season, ready in ways they could not have been without having gone through exactly what they went through. Because the structure is rising. It is visible now in ways it was not visible before. Perhaps not to everyone, and perhaps not in ways that make headlines, but in ways that matter. In the particular places where your distinct life intersects with the individual lives of the people around you, something is being built that is real and solid and grounded in the kind of deep foundation that only difficulty produces. That is not a consolation prize. That is the point. And I want you to know it as a point, not as something to settle for. Now let us look at the specifics. Beyond the broad strokes, beyond the general assurance that you have gifts and a purpose, which though true, can become something that a soul nods at without really receiving because it sounds like something said to everyone. I want to look at what is particular to you. The concrete, precise things I placed in you that are genuinely unlike what I placed in anyone else. Because the contribution I have planned you for is not a category assignment. It is not a general job description that multiple individuals could fill interchangeably. It is a distinct role that fits a unique human being, and you are that one. One of the things that makes this difficult to receive is that the most significant gifts are often the ones that feel most ordinary to their carrier. Someone who is naturally excellent at something tends not to experience that excellence as exceptional. They experience it as just how they function, just how they process the world, just how they move through situations. And because they have always done it this way, they have no reference point for understanding how different it looks from the outside, how much it costs people who do not have that natural capacity, how rare it actually is in the combination and degree in which it shows up in them uniquely. This is part of why I want to speak to you about your particular gifts rather than leaving you to identify them on your own. Because the identification process is complicated by familiarity. What you are most equipped with is what you are most blind to, not because you are careless or unaware, but because profound familiarity tends to produce invisibility. The fish does not notice the water. The one who has always been the one who holds things together under pressure does not recognize that capacity as exceptional, because from the inside, it does not feel exceptional. It feels like just doing what needs to be done. The individual who has always been able to see clearly into the emotional landscape of a room does not think of that as a rare gift because they have never experienced the world without it. It is just how the world looks to them. So when I point toward these distinct gifts, I am not only naming them for the first time. Often, I am naming things you already do, things you have done so consistently and naturally that you have never registered them as gifts. I am just asking you to look at them with fresh eyes, to consider what the room looks like to someone who does not have what you have, to feel, for a moment, the real weight of what you carry. There is something you do that others notice, but you have long since stopped registering as remarkable. You have done it so consistently, so naturally, so effortlessly, that it has become invisible to you through sheer familiarity. It is just how you function, just how you move through situations, just how you engage with people when they need something and you happen to be near. But I want to draw your attention back to it deliberately, because what you experience as ordinary functioning is, from the outside, anything but ordinary. What you give without thinking about giving it is something that many people spend their whole lives wishing they could find. Perhaps it is the quality of your attention when someone is speaking to you. I do not mean attention in the surface sense, the face arranged to convey that you are listening while the mind is elsewhere. The real thing, the quality of attention that makes a human being feel genuinely heard for perhaps the first time in a long time. The way you move toward what is being said, rather than processing it from behind the glass of your own waiting response. The way your questions, when you ask them, Make clear that you actually heard what was said and are following the thread of it, rather than redirecting to something you had already decided to say. You know what the alternative feels like. You have had conversations with people who were technically present and actually elsewhere, whose eyes moved around while you were speaking, whose responses made clear they had been composing their answer while you were still talking. You know the particular loneliness of being with someone and not being received by them. What you give to people is the opposite of that. Fully received. Actually heard. That is not a small thing. That is a rare thing. And I placed it in you. Or perhaps the distinct gift that shows up most consistently is in the domain of thinking. The particular angle your mind takes when a situation needs to be understood or a problem needs to be worked through. You do not process things the same way most of the people around you process them. You come at situations from a direction that was not obvious to the room before you entered it. You follow a thread that others did not see to follow, and what was apparently stuck becomes navigable because of how your unique mind moved through it. You have probably had the experience of saying something that seemed straightforward to you, the next obvious step in a line of reasoning, only to watch the other individual's face register genuine surprise, as though you had revealed something they would not have found on their own. That gap between what seems obvious to you and what seems revelatory to the people around you is the gap where your contribution lives. It is the space where your particular kind of thinking meets the actual needs that the people around you have. Maybe the gift is in the domain of making things, the particular quality that passes through you into whatever you create. Whether you create with your hands, or with words, or with sound, or with the arrangement of space, or with the arrangement of systems, or with the cultivation of relationships. There is a fingerprint on your work that could not belong to anyone else. Something about the way you bring things into being has a quality that reflects the maker at a level deeper than technique. When someone encounters what you have made, even if they cannot articulate why, they are receiving something that passed through a unique individual. That uniqueness is part of what makes it matter to the one receiving it. You have felt this yourself when you have encountered something made by another person that stopped you with its particular quality of presence. You were not only receiving the artifact, you were receiving the soul behind it. That is what your work offers. That is not an accident. Consider your capacity for care. The way other people's struggles find a genuine landing place in you, rather than bouncing off a surface of polite concern. The way you have lain awake thinking about someone who is going through something hard, running through what might help, feeling the weight of their situation as though it were partly yours. The way you have chosen inconvenience in order to show up for someone who needed to not be alone, not because someone was watching and would be impressed, but because not showing up was not something you were capable of doing in good conscience. That responsiveness, that movement toward difficulty rather than away from it, is not weakness. It is not a failure of healthy boundaries in every instance where it appears. It is the active expression of the intention I built into you, the thing that positions you to offer the kind of care that actually reaches a soul in distress, rather than the kind that stops at the comfortable edge of what is easy to give. The world does not lack people who feel sympathy at a distance. It does not lack people who are moved by someone else's pain for a moment and then return comfortably to their own preoccupations. What the world does not have enough of is people who stay, who are moved and then act on the movement, who feel the pull of someone else's need and move toward it rather than away from it, who show up not because it is convenient or because they will receive recognition for showing up, but because the calling inside them is oriented toward need and will not allow them to look away without cost. You have that orientation. It has sometimes been inconvenient. It has sometimes led you into situations that drained you or complicated your life or required more of you than felt sustainable. Learning to care with wisdom and boundaries is a real and ongoing process, and I am not asking you to abandon it, but I'm asking you to recognize the underlying orientation as a gift rather than a liability. The world needs people who are oriented toward need, who feel the pull of someone else's difficulty and do not dismiss it. The particular expression of that in your life is yours to calibrate and protect. The orientation itself is not something to apologize for. It is something I built in deliberately. It belongs to the blueprint. Perhaps the exact shape of your gift is precision. The ability to look at a complicated, overwhelming situation and identify with unusual clarity what actually matters, what the actual core of the issue is, where the real decision point lies beneath the layers of anxiety and noise that have made everything feel equally urgent. You can do that for people when they cannot do it for themselves, when they are too close to the situation to see it clearly, when the overwhelm has scrambled their ability to sort what is essential from what is secondary. Or perhaps it is patience. The distinct quality of remaining genuinely present with someone who needs more time than most people are willing to give them, who needs the same thing explained in 3 different ways before it settles, who is moving at a pace that could easily be experienced as frustrating, but that you are capable of meeting without performing patience, because actual patience for this particular kind of thing is built into you. Patience like that communicates something profound to its recipient. It communicates that they are worth waiting for, that their particular pace of movement is not a problem to be managed, that they are not behind. That is a message many people have never fully received, and you are capable of delivering it without words, simply by the quality of your staying. Now, here is something I want you to see about all the specific gifts I have been pointing toward, whatever the particular ones are that I built into you. Notice that they are directional. They move outward. They show up not in isolation, but in the context of relationship, in the presence of other people, in the proximity of other people's needs. You were not made to operate in a sealed room with your gifts pointing inward at yourself. You were crafted for encounter, for the precise, irreplaceable thing that happens when who you are meets who someone else is, and what you carry meets what they need, and the result is something that could not have been produced by any other combination of people. The calling on your life is fundamentally relational. It lives in connection. It functions in the space between you and the particular people I have placed around you. And here's the thing I need you to understand about these gifts. This particular thing I most need you to hear clearly. They do not require scale to be valid. They do not need an audience to count. The quality of attention you give someone does not become more valuable when it is given to 1,000 people simultaneously instead of one soul at a time. The care that shows up in the exact moment when someone is falling apart in the kitchen is not a lesser version of the care that shows up on a platform with cameras. The problem solving that happens in a conversation between 2 people is not inferior to the problem solving that happens in a boardroom. The gift is not made more real by the size of the room. The gift is the gift in every room where it is given. The calling on your life does not begin when you finally reach the right platform. It is already operational. It has been meeting needs for years that you have not fully registered as needs being met, because when something comes so naturally to you, you tend not to register the impact. You tend to see what you gave as the ordinary contribution of an ordinary person doing a normal thing. But the person on the receiving end did not experience it that way. The individual who felt genuinely heard by you in that conversation 3 years ago still remembers it. The one whose problem you helped untangle with what seemed to you like a fairly obvious observation was changed by that observation in ways that rippled outward. The soul you showed up for in a difficult moment carries the fact of your showing up as evidence of something they needed to know, which is that they are not alone. You did not make a speech. You did not stand on a platform. You just showed up as the individual you are, with the gifts I placed in you, and something real was built. That is what the blueprint is for. It is not about the grand gesture, but rather the accumulated weight of 1,000 ordinary moments in which a unique individual with particular gifts shows up in a distinct life and offers what they carry, stone by stone, one encounter at a time. That is how buildings are built. That is how the structure I am assembling through you comes together. Not in a single dramatic moment, but in the faithful accumulation of what you bring to the particular spaces of your particular life. There may be a season you are sitting with right now, or a season behind you that you have not fully made peace with. A period when none of this felt true, when the purpose felt entirely inaccessible, when the gifts had gone so quiet that you began to wonder whether they had ever really been there, or whether you had been deceiving yourself this whole time. A stretch of time when you were not contributing anything you could identify, when the sense of purpose was absent, when the flat gray texture of just getting through the days was all that was available. Those seasons are real. I do not want to speak about them only in retrospect, only as things that in hindsight were producing something, as though the difficulty of them was negated by their eventual purpose. They were hard. The silence was real. The absence of any felt sense of direction or contribution or meaning was real. The experience of moving through days that did not seem to add up to anything, that produced no evident fruit and offered no confirmation that any of it was worthwhile. That experience is one of the most difficult a human being can have. It does not feel like preparation. It feels like loss. I want to speak to that. My aim is not to explain it away, and it is not to convert your memory of the difficult season into something you feel you should have been grateful for. My aim is to tell you that I was there in it. I was not watching you struggle from a position of comfortable distance, pleased with how the process was developing, embedded in it with you, feeling the particular quality of the silence from the inside of it, knowing what it cost you. Present. There are times when the one who was made with intention finds themselves unable to access any sense of that intention. When the blueprint feels like something that belongs to someone else, something glimpsed in a brighter season that now seems impossibly remote. When the gifts that were supposed to be there have gone so quiet that the silence begins to feel definitive. When you start to construct an alternative narrative about yourself, one in which the whole thing about calling and purpose was a story you needed to believe when the present was too difficult to bear without it, and now the story is wearing thin, and what remains is just the ordinary, unluminous texture of a life that does not appear to add up to anything significant. That narrative is not the true one. But I know it is available to you in those seasons, and I know it is very easy to reach for. And I am not going to tell you that you should have been stronger than to reach for it, or that a child of mine with real faith would not have found themselves in that story. I am going to tell you that the story is wrong. I say this not because I am correcting you from a distance, but because I know the actual plan, and the plan did not stop being operative because you could not feel it. The blueprint does not expire when the builder loses the sense of the building. It waits. It is held in the hands of the architect, and the architect's hands do not shake. Something else I want to address, because I know how this experience goes. In the quiet seasons, the temptation is to try to manufacture the feeling of purpose by forcing activity. By filling the calendar with more things, committing to more responsibilities, occupying more spaces, producing more visible evidence that you are useful. As though if you can just generate enough output, the sense of meaning will follow from the volume of effort. As though purpose is something that can be earned by being busy enough. But that is not how it works. Manufactured busyness in a season of genuine quiet tends to produce exhaustion without satisfaction. It fills the silence with noise without addressing what the silence was actually about. And it often creates more distance from the actual calling rather than less, because it substitutes the performance of purposeful activity for the actual inhabiting of who you are. What I am inviting you to in the quiet seasons is not more noise. It is a different quality of attention. Slowing down enough to listen for what is actually present even when it is not loud. Trusting that something real is happening even when you cannot verify it by visible output. Remaining oriented toward the intention even when you cannot feel the direction. That kind of attentive waiting is not passive. It is one of the harder forms of faithfulness because it does not produce the immediate sense of forward movement that activity produces. But it is the kind of waiting that produces depth. The kind that allows the roots to go further down before the growth goes further up. The kind that builds a quality of settledness in a person that is not otherwise available. And when the quiet season ends, as it will, as it always does, what emerges is a soul who is more grounded, more genuinely themselves, more ready for what the next season holds than they were when the quiet began. Think about what happens to a seed in winter. The earth above it is cold and hard. From any external perspective, nothing is happening. The ground gives no indication that there is life beneath it. If you did not know a seed had been planted, you would look at that ground and see nothing but dormant, undifferentiated earth. But underground in the dark, in conditions that do not feel hospitable to anything living, the seed is doing the most critical work of its existence. The shell is beginning to break open, not from damage, but from the irresistible internal pressure of what is alive inside it. The first tentative structures that will eventually become roots are pushing outward through the broken shell. The capacity to reach toward light is developing in conditions of complete darkness. The seed does not know it is growing. It is simply responding from deep inside itself to what it was made to respond to. Your seasons of silence may have been that underground work, the breaking open of something that was not going to grow without being broken first. The development of root systems that will eventually support what is growing above ground, but that have to be established in hiddenness before the growth above ground can be sustained. What felt to you like nothing happening was, from the perspective of the blueprint, often the most important part of the process. Because roots determine whether what eventually emerges has the capacity to last through the seasons that come after it. Shallow growth is spectacular for a time and then vulnerable. Deep growth is less immediate and more durable. The underground seasons produce depth. I want to gently address something you may have told yourself during the quiet seasons. The idea that if the gifts were real, they would be consistently accessible to you. That real purpose makes itself known without long interruptions, without extended seasons of fog and flatness and apparent dormancy. That if you were really who I made you to be, you would always be able to feel it. That the feeling would be a reliable compass. That its absence signals something wrong with the design or with the person or both. That is not how it works. The most reliable structures are not the ones that have never been tested by stillness. They are the ones that were tested by stillness and came through it intact, having discovered in the process which elements of the architecture are actually foundational. The seasons when you could not feel the purpose were not seasons when the purpose was absent. They were seasons when you were being invited to hold on to what you knew rather than what you felt. And trust that holds on when the feeling has left is a different quality of trust than trust that depends on the feeling to maintain itself. It is the kind that does not require constant confirmation to remain operative. It is the kind built for the long haul. And the faithfulness that continues to function in the absence of felt purpose. The willingness to keep showing up in the spaces of your life and offering what you have even when what you have feels insufficient, even when you cannot feel the design or sense the direction. That faithfulness is itself a form of the pattern operating. The calling does not only operate when you feel inspired, it also operates through the daily faithfulness of someone who has stopped requiring confirmation before they keep going. There is something profound built in the seasons when someone continues to give what they have without receiving reassurance that it matters. What is built in those seasons is the kind of character that I can build more through than through the character that only functions when conditions are ideal. Hold on to this, particularly in the seasons when it is hardest to hold on to anything. The plan I placed in you before you were born is not contingent on your ability to feel it today. What I built into the architecture of who you are does not require your awareness of it to remain structurally sound. The building does not stop being a building because the occupant cannot currently feel the walls. You are held by something more stable than your current feelings about yourself. You are held by what I know about you, and what I know is that you were made for something specific, that something is still unfolding in ways you do not always have visibility into, that the underground work is real and it is producing roots, and that what emerges on the other side of the difficult seasons will be more grounded, more genuinely you, more ready for what it is going to be asked to carry than anything the easier seasons could have produced on their own. Now I want to draw close and speak to the part of you that has been listening to all of this and receiving it for others. The part that has been nodding along and thinking of people you know who need to hear exactly this. Which is generous of you, genuinely generous. But I notice you have been doing something with these words that you often do with things that feel too good to fully claim for yourself. You have been directing them slightly away from the center of who you are, passing them along to others in your mind before you have fully received them yourself. What I have been saying is for you, precisely. I want to speak directly to the part of you that still sometimes suspects it is more ordinary than crafted, more flawed than formed, more damaged than built. The part that hears words about intention and calling and purpose, and finds them beautiful in the abstract, and slightly unreal in the concrete. The part that would hear these exact words offered to someone you love and feel moved by them, and would feel the truth of them for that individual, but struggles to occupy the same truth for itself because there is something that keeps redirecting your own story into a more modest register. I want you to stop doing that with what I am saying right now. This is not because modesty is a problem, but because this particular form of modesty is actually a refusal. A refusal to receive what is genuinely being offered. And what is being offered here is not flattery. It is not encouragement crafted to prop up someone whose actual making is deficient. It is a clear and honest account of what I built, and what it is for, and what it is capable of doing in the particular life that surrounds it. What I am releasing over you in this moment is an overflow. I do not mean in the sense of something rushing in from outside and overwhelming the existing structure. In the sense of what becomes possible when a structure is finally being used for what it was built for. When the alignment between the intention and the function is restored. When the edited, reduced, carefully managed version of who you are gives way to the actual version. When you stop holding yourself back from full occupancy of the person I made and move into it completely. There is fruitfulness on the other side of that occupancy that you have not yet tasted. I do not mean fruitfulness in the sense of external recognition or achievement that can be pointed to and quantified. Fruitfulness in the sense of the deep satisfaction of doing the exact thing you were made to do in the precise way you were made to do it, in the particular places where your life already intersects with the lives of others. The sense of rightness that comes when someone is operating in genuine alignment with their calling. It does not feel like performance. It feels like home. You will find, as you step into the fullness of the design, that the exact capacities I placed in you meet the exact needs of the people around you with a precision that will sometimes stop you, because you will be in the right place at the right moment, with exactly the right thing for exactly that individual, in exactly that situation. And it will be so precisely fitted that you will feel the fit of it. Rather than a coincidence, it will feel like an intention revealed. The one who needs to be heard in the particular way you hear people will appear in your day. The problem that requires the distinct angle your mind takes will present itself. The situation that calls for the particular quality of care you carry will arise, and you will be positioned for it, and you will meet it, and something will be built in that exchange that could not have been built by any other combination of soul and moment. That is what I have been preparing you for. It is not a stage you might eventually reach. It is moments, precise, unrepeatable moments in the particular life that is already yours. Moments that do not require you to be different than you are, that require precisely and only who you are. One moment at a time. One faithful showing up at a time. One stone placed in the structure at a time. And what you give in those moments does not end when the moment ends. What passes through you toward another person keeps moving. The quality of attention you give someone in a conversation creates conditions in which they can hear themselves clearly, and hearing themselves clearly may change a direction they were about to go, and the changed direction affects the life of someone connected to them, and on in ways you will never be able to trace because the ripple moves beyond your sight. You are not intended to be the end point of what I give through you. You are meant to be a point of transmission, a vessel through whom things move. And what moves through you when you are fully occupying the pattern does not stay local. It spreads. It will not make the news, but it will change actual lives in actual places. Receive this. Receive the fullness of what I am pouring out over you in this season. It is not something earned by virtue of your performance, and it is not something contingent on whether you have finally sorted out all the things in you that still need sorting. As what it is. A gift, particular to you, prepared before you were born, already attached to your name, already fitted to the shape of your life. Receive it with the same openness with which you would receive it on behalf of someone you love. Because the one I made when I made you is someone who deserves to be received with that kind of openness. That child of mine is worth that kind of welcome, and that child is you. Something I want you to notice about receiving this fully. When you receive it, really receive it, and not just pass it along to others in your mind, something becomes available to the people around you that was not available before. The individual who knows they are crafted and that the making is good does not interact with others from a position of scarcity, does not give from depletion, does not need constant reassurance from the people around them to maintain the sense that they are worth something. The soul who has genuinely received their purpose from the hands of the one who made them with that kind of settled confidence that comes from being known and claimed is freer to give generously, without keeping score, without the anxiety of whether they are giving enough or giving too much or giving the wrong things. Receiving what I am giving you is not only for you. It changes the quality of what you are able to give. It changes the kind of presence you are able to be. It makes you more available, more genuinely free, more able to occupy the calling without the constant noise of self-doubt in the background. That is why I am pressing you to receive this, not as a luxury, as a prerequisite for the giving I am asking you to do. There's a word I want to leave with you. I say this not to bring things to a tidy conclusion, because the work we have been describing does not reach a tidy conclusion in this season of life. It is ongoing work. It is the work of a whole life, accumulated in small increments, built one moment at a time over years and decades. There is no arrival point in this age after which the building is complete and the work is done. There is only the continuing choice to keep showing up as who you are, in the spaces where your life is already being lived, with the gifts you already carry. What sustains that kind of ongoing faithfulness is not a feeling. Feelings shift. They are affected by sleep and weather and the quality of the day and the behavior of the people around you and 100 other variables that have nothing to do with the underlying reality of who you are and what you carry. What sustains the faithful showing up is a settled knowledge, a fact that you know independent of what you feel about it on any given day. And the fact is this: you were designed, not as a general category of human being, but as a distinct individual with a particular blueprint and a unique contribution that belongs to the exact life you are living. That fact does not change based on how you feel about it. It simply is. There will be seasons in the days ahead when the purpose feels accessible, and you can feel the rightness of what you are doing, and everything aligns in a way that confirms the direction. Enjoy those seasons. They are not the only valid seasons, but they are genuinely good ones. Let yourself be nourished by them without attaching your identity to the fact of their presence, because they will shift, as all seasons shift, and when they do, the settled knowledge has to be able to hold you without the feeling as its foundation, and there will be seasons when the knowledge is all you have. When the feeling has gone quiet, and the confirmation is absent, and the evidence is harder to see, and every practical indicator suggests that what you are doing is not making a discernible difference. In those seasons, the settled knowledge is the stone. It may not be exciting and it may not be inspiring, but it simply holds. And you place the next stone because you know why you are building, even when you cannot see the building clearly. That is faithfulness in its most essential form. It is not the version that feels like faith. It is the version that acts like faith in the absence of the feeling. That is the version I am most asking for. That is the version that builds something that lasts. I am pleased with you. It is not in the abstract, generalizing way of a creator who feels diffuse goodwill toward all of creation. It is in the concrete, particular way of a builder who watches the structure being assembled faithfully, stone by stone, and finds it good. Perhaps not perfect, and perhaps not without the places where the mortar is uneven or the stone is not quite as well fitted as it might be. But good, genuinely good, the product of a particular individual operating with real faithfulness in the real life they were given, building something real with what they actually have. That is what I see, and what I see, I call good. Faithfulness, in the context of that settled knowledge, looks different for different people because the plan is different for different people. For you, it might look like making time for a conversation you did not technically have time for, because something in you recognizes that the conversation is needed and that you are the person positioned to offer it. It might look like bringing the full quality of your creativity to a project that will be seen by a very small number of people, because the project deserves your full creativity, regardless of how many people will be affected by it. The number does not determine the quality of what you bring. The calling determines the quality of what you bring. And the blueprint does not reduce its output based on audience size. Faithfulness might look like patience in a situation where patience is being tested, where someone is moving more slowly than is convenient, where the same ground is being covered for the third time, where the temptation to cut short and move on is genuinely present. And you stay. You stay not because you are performing patience, but because something in you, the architecture, the thing I built in, recognizes that this individual needs to be waited for. That waiting for them is itself the gift. That the quality of the staying communicates something that words could not adequately say. Faithfulness might look like speaking. Saying the thing you see clearly when staying silent would be easier and safer and more comfortable. When you notice something that needs to be named and you name it, not with aggression or self-righteousness, but with the particular quality of honesty that you carry, the kind that serves the one hearing it rather than the one speaking it. That is a distinct gift. The ability to say the true thing in a way that the soul receiving it can actually receive. Not everyone has it. You do. And sometimes faithfulness requires using it even when you would rather not. As you move forward from this moment, resist the pull toward comparison. The pull that says your contribution is smaller than someone else's because the room is smaller, or the audience is less visible, or the recognition is less public. The pull that measures the blueprint by how it compares to someone else's blueprint, rather than by how it functions in the exact life it was built for. Every building is not a cathedral. Some buildings are unremarkable from the outside and essential from the inside. Some buildings serve a neighborhood in ways that no one outside the neighborhood will ever know about, and their value is not diminished one fraction by the lack of outside recognition. The value is in the function. The value is in what actually happens there. You are not the wrong version of someone else. You are the right and only version of yourself, and that version carries something that no other version of anyone else carries. It was built into you with intention, and it is deployed in the particular life that is yours, with the precise people who are around you, in the exact circumstances that surround you right now. That is the territory of your calling. It is not too small. It is exactly the right size for the one who was made for it. Go forward with this settled. Carry it not as a feeling that will lift you in good seasons and then abandon you in harder ones. As a structural fact that holds whether or not you can feel it. You were crafted. You were built with precision and joy and genuine care. The gifts in you are real and they are already at work in the distinct life that surrounds you. The calling does not wait for you to become someone different. It is operative right now, through the person you already are, in the places where your life already takes you. Every act of faithfulness, every moment of choosing to show up fully as the individual I made rather than the edited version of you that the world has asked for, is a stone placed in the structure that is being built. One stone, one moment, one faithful choice. One of the things I want to address directly is the notion that the calling only counts when you feel it counting, when there is a felt sense of significance attached to what you are doing, when the moment feels weighty enough to justify calling it purposeful. Because if you wait for that felt significance before you give your full presence to what is in front of you, you will give your full presence to very few things. Most of the moments in which the purpose most needs to be operational are ordinary feeling moments. Consider the conversation that does not feel particularly significant while it is happening, or the small act of care that does not register as a turning point while you are giving it. The patient presence in a situation that feels routine. These are the moments where most of the real building happens. They are rarely the memorable moments. They are the unremarkable ones. The calling does not announce itself most of the time. It does not come with a sense of occasion that signals this is important, pay close attention. It just shows up in the texture of ordinary life, in the shape of the moment that is directly in front of you, asking for what you have, and you give it, without ceremony, without the feeling of significance, just faithfully, as the one you are, in the moment that is real. And what is built through that faithfulness accumulates into something real, even when no individual stone feels like it matters very much on the day it is placed. As you move through the days ahead, I want you to carry one practical thing with you. A a simple question to ask in the moments when you are tempted to hold yourself back, to offer the reduced version of yourself rather than the full version, to deflect rather than receive, to shrink rather than occupy. The question is this: what would it look like to show up fully in this moment as the individual I was made to be? I do not mean in the grand sense, I mean in the immediate sense. In this conversation, in this situation, with this person. What does full occupancy of the calling look like here? The answer will not always be dramatic. It will not always involve grand gestures or obvious impact. Sometimes full occupancy looks like listening without rushing to respond. Sometimes it looks like asking one more question rather than moving on. Sometimes it looks like staying in a difficult conversation rather than finding a reason to exit it. Sometimes it looks like creating something with your full attention rather than a fraction of it. The particular expression changes depending on the individual moment, but the principle is constant. Do not give the room a reduced version of yourself when you have the full version to offer. There will be moments when giving the full version costs something, when it requires you to stay when leaving would be easier, to speak when silence would be more comfortable, to create with genuine effort when something adequate and quick would technically suffice. Pay the cost. Pay it not as martyrdom, but as investment. As the faithful builder who places the next stone with care, because the building matters, not because anyone is watching how carefully the stone is placed. What you build through the faithful expenditure of who you are accumulates over time into something you cannot see in any individual stone, but that stands visible and real in the whole. Decades from now, there will be people who can point to something in their lives and trace it back, not necessarily with accurate memory of the specific moment, but with the sense that something turned at a particular point, that something in them opened or settled or was given permission by an encounter with a certain individual who showed up in a particular way. They will not always remember the occasion clearly, but the thing that was built in them by that encounter will still be standing. That someone, whose name they may or may not remember, who showed up fully in the moment as the soul they were meant to be, and in doing so gave something that could not have been given any other way. That is who I made you to be. That moment is what I equipped you for. That is how buildings are built, one stone at a time, without always being able to see the full shape of what is taking form. But the architect sees it. The architect has always seen it clearly from before the first stone was placed, and the architect is genuinely, particularly, deeply and distinctly pleased with what is being built through you. Amen. If this message touched your heart today, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that they were made on purpose and with deliberate, particular care. Drop an amen in the comments to receive this blessing over your life. And if you carry that quiet knowing, that sense that there is more to you than the world has fully seen yet, trust that feeling. It is not imagination. It is not wishful thinking. It is recognition. The design is real. It is active, and it is yours. Subscribe so you never miss a message, and come back whenever you need to be reminded of who you were made to be and what you were made to carry into the world that is yours to serve.